Now, the world is going through uncertain economic climate. Disruptions are many and the hurdles being thrown up by unexpected external shocks are numerous. But even in these tumultuous times, there are companies that are bravely navigating the storm. They're being instrumental in building a better future, not just for themselves, but for their stakeholders. It is this winning spirit that global consultancy firm Deloitte honoured earlier this evening at an event in Mumbai. So what does it take for a business to be eligible to bear the crown of India's best management company? Here are snippets. Take a look.
The landscape, what was pre-COVID and the post-COVID, is completely different. In the post-COVID days, the technology, adoption of technology, better supply chain, better cost management, all those things have become an important factor. I'm not saying this was not there in the pre-COVID, but in the post-COVID, the importance on these three, primarily technology, digitalization, and the cost management and the better supply chain, have all become, again, a lot more importance. And ultimately, all these things leads to a better stakeholder value. And without managing these four, you can't have better stakeholder value. So what was considered as a stakeholder value, purely a return on investment, now has gone into a different level. And that's what the private companies and the family companies are focusing on.
So what are a couple of pillars, 4 pillars that you look at when you look at the best managed company, right? List that for us. And generally, what is it that these companies are struggling with? Any one point that you would like to mention there?
Sure. So the 4 pillars are strategy. And in strategy, we look at and evaluate companies around the fact that they have a strategy in place, they have a purpose, they have a vision, and that translates into a strategy which is executed effectively. So that's the first pillar. The second pillar is around culture and commitment, which is about the culture of the organization. How does that culture get imbibed right through the various levels of the organization? Is it something that one can stand up and speak about? Is this the company's culture? And what is it that the company stands for? And again, the commitment to the people. The third is on innovation. What are the strategies that the company has adopted? How much does it invest in innovation? How much does innovation mean? And it doesn't mean that every company has to be the best in innovation. The fact that they are actually focused on innovation in a very structured, scientific, strategic manner is very important. And finally, it's about financials and governance.
As we build to the $5 trillion economy of India, which I believe is probably 27 or 28. I mean, every year the IMF, every day the IMF keeps bringing down the growth ratings, but I think all of us in the room know that growth still exists, and we're all very positive about it. But our own surveys and our research tell us that in order to do this, and by the way, we are also advising certain states in the country in terms of how they get to their contribution to get to the 5 trillion. Fundamental is increased labor participation in the workforce, increase in per capita, the continuance by the government in infrastructure spending, and most importantly, and this is where I think companies here play a very important part, reduction in regional imbalances. We have to see how we get to the next year of cities and towns in this country and spread, particularly around manufacturing and services. I believe that it's about 25% of that growth to 5 trillion will really come from manufacturing and services. And that is the role that we have today. And we've got to leverage on the private sector and in specific the MSMEs to make this possible.
As your businesses scale, as our country scales, the processes and the methods that we use to run a company or a country that's of a smaller size has to be very different from what it will look like in the future for 2 reasons. The size and the scale itself, and of course the changing times that we have seen. And we've seen some very, very rapid changes in the last 2 years. One of the projects that we did in the last 1 year is to go back and talk to about 35 people that are independent chairs of companies. They're ex-regulators, academics, to try and understand 2 things, or 2 sets of things. One was, how did the companies cope with the pace of change and the rapidly escalating crisis that we were faced with? And how did that impact the functioning of your boards? And through that learning, we came up with what we are calling the 5 avatars, of what board governance will look like going into the future.